Hi, I'm John Cash. Welcome to John Cash Ministries and Revelations Church's Daily Devotion. Today, I want to talk about the rocky road of a Christian. Folks, you can go from a great high to a great low just like that spiritually. You can go from everything in your life going perfectly, in particular your ministry, leading people to the Lord. Really, there's peace and there's joy, and then suddenly, boom! And guess what? You didn't do anything wrong. Now, sometimes that boom, you do things wrong, but there are times when no good deed goes unpunished. Here in Acts chapter 14, we pick up where we left off with Paul and Barnabas reminding the people after they had healed a lame man that, hey, this is not us, this is God. And they remind them and they tell them about God and His goodness and His power and all that stuff. And we pick up in 14:18 where the Bible then says, even with these words, they had difficulty keeping the crowd from sacrificing to them. This crowd of people, they wanted to make Paul and Barnabas their gods, Zeus and Hermes. They really thought that they had come down from heaven to the earth and that, this was the real deal for these people. Paul and Barnabas would have nothing to do with it. So they had healed a lame man. Then they were tempted with religious pride, Satan was trying to get them to take glory for what had happened. And they were having a real tough time dealing with the people because they weren't listening to them. They were still trying to sacrifice to them. Now, at this point, you would think maybe things would calm down and everybody would go home and Paul and Barnabas would be able to take off. They had won another victory, but it had been tough. Well, folks, guess what? They went from the frying pan to the fire. And I mean literally. In verse 19, the Bible then says, then some Jews came from Antioch and Iconium and won the crowd over. They stoned Paul and dragged him outside the city, thinking he was dead. Whew. Okay, what happened? Well, in verse 19, we have a bunch of Jews. These were religious zealots who were opposing God at every point. And remember, Paul was that at one time, named Saul. And they hated the way, that was the name of Christianity back then. And so they saw what was going on, and they saw an opportunity to finally get Paul. And sure enough, they took advantage of it. We don't know exactly what they said, but they won the crowd over. The crowd didn't sacrifice to Paul and Barnabas. In fact, they got angry at him. Okay? And so they stoned him. Now, folks, understand, this is painful. This is painful. Imagine stones coming at you, hitting you in the body and the head and the face. And it says here, they thought he was dead. Now, we don't know exactly how bad it got, but it got bad enough to thinking he was dead. Why did God allow this? This was his prized possession, Paul. Well, if you think about it, what did Jehovah God the Father do with his prized possession, Jesus? He allowed him to die on the cross. So understand, folks, you can go from highs to lows very quickly. And God's in both of them. He is. He allows it to happen for his purpose. Paul is stoned. They're thinking he's dead. And the Bible then says in verse 20, but after the disciples had gathered around him, he got up and went back into the city. Has Paul lost his mind? Here the disciples gather around him. I'm sure they're praying for him. He wakes up, bloodied up, and any sane individual would go, okay, time to move on. Let's go to that city. I think we're finished here. Not Paul. He's brave. And he's led by the Spirit. I'm convinced God wanted him to go back in there. So he gets back up and he goes for more. Folks, this is the sign of a Christian who just loves God and is led by the Spirit. They don't care what people think. They don't consider the dangers. Well, maybe they consider them, but they go anyway if God tells them to. So he goes back into the city, at least for a day. It says the next day he and Barnabas left. So, folks, here's the bottom line. There are going to be spiritual highs. There are going to be spiritual lows. God's involved in both of them. Worship Him no matter if you're on the mountain or in the valley. That is the secret to success in your Christian life.